Join us for 3 days in Orlando, Florida in February 2025 for an event designed to equip IT professionals like you with the tools, knowledge, and strategies to navigate the ever-changing cybersecurity landscape. Secure your spot and register to join us for 3 days of immersive learning, collaboration, and skill building with hands-on hacking labs and much more.
It's good to be reminded of all of the threats that we face and the different ways that we're vulnerable.
You're only as strong as your weakest link, right? You can have all the tools that you want in place, but if you're not taking care of the end user, I think that's the weakest link there.
Network with peers from around the globe, share experiences, and learn from real-world case studies, all aimed at enhancing your capabilities as an IT professional. Register now for Zero Trust World 2025 and take the first step towards a more secure tomorrow.
Good morning, Rob.
Good morning, Danny.
So welcome everyone today, or afternoon, depending on where you are, to our how-to guide to successfully deploy and manage application whitelisting. So this one's going to be a little bit interesting because obviously part of this is going to be demoing how ThreatLocker can help you, but we don't want to start off with that. We want to talk about what whitelisting is, why it's important, what strategies you can use to deploy, what makes you weaker, what makes you stronger, what's easier, what's harder, where everything falls apart. And I'm waiting for Rob's entry joke, which he normally does, or something that he's going to say.
You called it whitelisting. It's called allowlisting, Danny.
Okay, sorry. So there you go. No, normally he has something to say to me.
I didn't want to say it, but when you invited me, I just had to.
Yeah. So okay, so let me do this. I'm going to share my screen if I can, and I'm just going to do this to kind of guide us along the beginning of this. A couple of housekeeping items. One is if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. Ask them in the questions and answer section. We will try and get to as many questions as we can. If we don't get to, it's not because we don't like you. It's because
it might be because we don't like them.
Yes, but we won't tell you that. Yeah. So feel free to post those questions in the QA. Don't use the chat because we don't necessarily monitor that as much. During the exercise, the event today, we're going to give away 2 tickets to Zero Trust World, one of which is a regular Zero Trust World ticket. So I think the commercial just did our justice, so I don't have to explain what Zero Trust World is, but it really is a cool event here in Orlando, Florida. It's going to be double the size next year. So looking forward to seeing our partners and our customers there. But in addition to that, we're also going to give a fully hosted pass away. And the fully hosted pass will essentially give you flights, hotels, accommodation. You'll be our special guest, and you get to go backstage and other cool things as a special guest at Zero Trust World. So hopefully we get 2 winners here today. We're going to ask some questions, so pay attention during the webinar because we're going to make the questions up at the end like we normally do because we're not very prepared. Okay.
We do have a Q&A already. Tim Rutherford says, saw you on TV, Danny.
That's been the story of my week.
Who hasn't? A better question would be, who hasn't seen Danny on TV recently?
So don't ask that question because you're going to get lots of... Do people still watch TV?
Tim Rutherford does.
So, okay. So let's get started then. Why? Why would we use allowlisting? Why is it so important? And it's a little bit personal to me because this is the reason ThreatLocker exists. I mean, we've got a pretty diverse endpoint protection platform right now that has a lot of features and functions in it. But the reason ThreatLocker actually exists is because we wanted to make the idea of allowlisting viable, usable for businesses. And I think there's a reason for that. And that is it actually really does help with cyber threats. And I just noticed something I said at Zero Trust World this year, which is blocking software by default is going to do more for your cybersecurity defense posture than any other thing you can do. Now, that's not saying you shouldn't do anything else, but it is one of the big ticket items you're going to get a lot of protection from, more so than anything else you can probably do today. Closely followed by dual factor authentication. So the first reason is stop unwanted or untrusted or wanted software. Why do we want to stop untrusted software? Well, user productivity, and this is a business reason, and I want to start with the business reasons, not necessarily just the IT reasons, but if users have crap on their computer that is distracting them, games, whether it's coupon clippers, whether it's just PDFs, readers that aren't trusted by the company, and they pop up and they say, hey, your trial has expired, you got to buy a license, and that interferes with their workflow, it's not a good thing. So by stopping untrusted software in lots of ways, we help users be more productive. One, by stopping them do things they shouldn't be doing, but also stopping expired apps, garbage apps, slowing down their computer, all things like that. Unwanted web.
The slowing computer thing is something that's very personal to me, because I've worked for an IT company, an MSP, for many, many years. And I know the pain of giving somebody a computer today and it's all singing, all dancing, super fast, does everything they needed to do. And you get that phone call in 6 months and they go, my computer's running slowly. And then you log in and they've got like 15 different toolbars and 40 Chrome extensions and 3 different antiviruses somehow installed in the machine. And they go, hey, I need you to fix my computer. It's slow. So that is very much something I feel. And the idea of sending a computer out to somebody today and it coming back in exactly the same state as you sent it out with exactly the same software you sent it out with, is something that very much appeals.
And a broken screen, you can't stop that.
Well, you can't stop broken screens.
So it really is important, and that ultimately reduces to less help desk tickets, because the amount of tickets you get, because my computer's slow, my browser's clogging up, I've got 15 extensions added into Chrome, my hard drive's out of space because I installed my personal Dropbox and synced 2 terabytes of photos.
Yeah. all the dumb stuff that users do to get themselves in trouble that IT guys have to clean up.
Now, the next reason, stopping malware. Still, today, even with all the advanced malware, the fileless malware, the in-memory attacks, at some point, most malware attacks involve the use of an executable. They involve an executable file or a DLL file, which is still an executable running from one DLL, to actually do the work. And yes, they can do it through injecting PowerShell commands, and they can do it through in-memory attacks with Regeserve. But most malware attacks today still involve someone downloading an executable and something happening. And quite often, what happens, and what a lot of companies will tell you is, hey, this was an in-memory attack. And it's not a lie. But what will happen is the attacker will give them an executable, they'll download it, they'll install it, and then they'll use PowerShell or use Regeserve to avoid detection. But at some point, an executable ran in a lot of cases, yes. Yes, and you can, there are ways you can do that. So anyone who's shouting, no, I can do this and I can do that and I can use Red Rabbit, and that's true, I agree. But I can tell you, we've got over 2 million endpoints running ThreatLocker. We've probably seen 5 or 6 cyber attacks on, always in monitor-only mode of ThreatLocker and not blocking whitelisting in. I can tell you of every single one we see that's successful, there's an executable ran at some point. And we always see that green deny that it was in monitor-only mode, it wasn't blocking, it wasn't enforcement mode, and here it is. So malware does use an executable. The other reason is people often have this myth that administrative permissions, taking away administrative permissions, will stop malware from running or will stop software from running. That's not true. So if a user is
installing, maybe
not true too, because you can install Google Chrome, Dropbox, TeamViewer, all under the user context folder without being a local admin. It'll stop it installing in the Windows folder or the program files folder. So it's important, if you want to stop malware, people stop installing software.
I'm just going to say, based on our last webinar, I think the number of people who did think that taking away admin rights from users would solve this problem was, quite frankly, terrifying.
Yes, that was a little bit concerning. Third, it doesn't rely on, and I wrote this in the slide before this week happened, so I don't want to be abused on this. It doesn't rely on 10 updates a day. Like the way that AV and EDR, or particularly signature-based AV works, is it requires 10 updates a day just to keep on top of the malware detection. And when you're using an allow listing, you technically only really need to update it just before you update your software. So it doesn't need those constant updates and those constant changes in order to protect you from it. So from malware attacks.
I saw a stat somewhere, Danny. There's 160,000 new pieces of malware released every single day.
There's more than that. So then that's the problem with stats, is 99% of them are wrong.
So, but that one wasn't made up. I did actually read it somewhere. But again, it's the nature of some other tools, is they do require signatures and definition updates.
Okay, the other thing is it stops other cyber threats. Cyber threats aren't always malware. You get that nice call from a very nice man claiming to be at Microsoft, or AI generated your IT director saying, hey, can you download and install TeamViewer on your machine? We need to do a system update. Or that's a cyber threat. It doesn't involve the use of malware. So stopping those remote access tools is really, really important. It stops users being tricked. I actually had a customer say, send me an email probably 3 years ago now, and it's like, all it said was, thank you. You saved my ass by blocking good software. Nothing else in the context. So of course I assume the customer was expecting me to call them. So I called them and said, what are you talking about? And what I thought they were going to say is we blocked one of their competitors installing their IT tools on the machine. But what they actually did say was someone tried to run Go to Assist, and we called the customer to say, hey, we noticed, thinking there was another IT company trying to steal us, that you're trying to run Go to Assist. And the customer was like, oh, no, don't worry. I just got on the phone with Microsoft to help me get viruses off my computer. And obviously wasn't the case. So it stops other cyber threats. Things like compression tools like WinRAR, 7-zip, all can be used to encrypt and files as well. So other tools.
WinRAR can actually be used for exfiltrating data as well. Interesting.
It's a pretty powerful tool.
Pretty
nearly as powerful as PowerShell.
Yeah, well, almost. But again, encryption, removing stuff, exfiltrating stuff, you can do all of that with WinRAR.
Okay. Don't let me get WinRAR on my machine.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't want to get too far behind the Q&A. So Simon Davies has asked, can you also stop apps being added from the Windows App Store as well?
Yes, so you can stop apps being added from the Windows App Store. And actually, did you realize that they're shipping TikTok with Windows now?
What?
Yes, we have a shipped with Windows out of the box.
Built in. Really?
So I will say, in fairness, it's just a weblet. So it's not technically
the app itself, but it's still TikTok.
It's still, I mean.
Well, look, if we were young and Stanley, we'd be probably going, yay, TikTok.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we're not.
Yeah, so it can't see any of your data. It's basically a weblet, but it's coming in Windows out the box, I guess. I don't know. I feel like it was something you shouldn't have done if you were Microsoft. It's just one of those. I know they put Candy Crush and all that garbage on there as well, but I feel like given the environment with China and everyone saying TikTok's stealing our data and the potential of it needing to be force sold, it probably shouldn't have been shipped to Windows. But yes, with allowlisting, you can block Windows apps.
Dexter has asked, are you able to whitelist Windows Store applications?
Yes. So technically, the answer would be, well, look, this is the idea of allowlisting. So what is allowlisting? Allowlisting is the idea that you only allow the software you need, aka whitelist it, and you block all other software, versus blocklisting, which is I create a list of software that isn't allowed in my environment. And the idea is that if you only allow the software you need, you're not missing things you didn't forget about. But you can explicitly block Windows apps, or you can only allow the software you need, and you can allow certain Windows apps. So you can say Candy Crush can work because I want to play Candy Crush at lunchtime. So,
Tim has also asked, do the built-in compression tools for Windows also allow for data exfiltration if the zip file is password protected, or is there a feature in 7-zip and WinRAR that can be exploited?
So PowerShell built into Windows. The compression in Windows is very basic, but PowerShell has compression tools and it allows for data exfiltration. And there's a whole bunch of other things on there too.
But WinRAR, absolutely you can. And again,
yes.
The whole point is it's designed, it's actually encryption is built into it. I mean, it is effectively, I'm not going to say it's effectively ransomware, but it has ransomware qualities, which is you can encrypt stuff, you can delete stuff, and you can actually exfiltrate stuff. So I noticed, I did see a WinRAR command recently that actually had an IEX like PowerShell in it. So effectively take this, put it there. And I'm pretty sure it's just a single command they need to run. They don't need to do anything too advanced in WinRAR.
We're going to show you that at Zero Trust One next year, aren't we, Rob?
Are we?
I don't know.
We are now.
We are now. We just added it to the agenda on the labs. How to use WinRAR to exfil data. End-to-end data theft.
Danny, as long as it doesn't involve pineapples, I am fully on board. So
I have I have a pineapple specially ordered for you. I can't wait till our pineapple webinar later on in the year.
Or what?
We have another pineapple webinar.
No, we don't.
Did you not see the schedule?
I'm going to be sick that day.
Yeah. Okay. So the idea of allow list is you list files that you want to run, and I'm using the word files right now, executables, DLL, script files, and you block all other files from running. So there's different ways you can create this allow list. So and people often say to me, well, it's amazing because you'll take a customer who's gone from 0 allow listing, 0 security in place, and then you'll say, okay, well, in this case, these files are changing regularly. We want to allow this folder, but only if it's called by this process. And they'll get so entangled with, but what if someone does this? The alternative is we just leave it wide open, full stop. But there's different ways we can list permissions. And I want to go back to the first time I used allow listing, because it was actually on a terminal server. And yes, I said terminal server because I'm old. In 2002, I want to say. So we deployed terminal servers, and it had multi-tenant full desktop for users in the company. And within about 7 days, the server was destroyed by garbageware that everybody installed onto their profile. And the CPU was up and the terminal server was unfunctional. So we rebuilt the server because that's all we could do. And when we rebuilt the server, what we did is we created an explicit allow list using Microsoft's built-in software restriction policies, which is an absolute nightmare. Now, if your goal was to just to stop users running things and wasn't necessarily to stop malware, one of the ways you could do an allow list is you can actually permit entire folders. It's not really a security solution. It does have security properties, and it goes a long way from being an endpoint protection solution. But one of the ways you can add things to the whitelist is folders. And what I've done is I've seen people start off with much wider whitelists and say, okay, this is a list of everything that's allowed, like this whole Windows folder, for example. I don't want to figure out what's in the Windows folder. I'm going to allow the entire Windows folder, the whole program files folder. Don't particularly care for it myself, but it is an option. You could also get down to, hey, this program files folder. So maybe I've got AutoCAD and it's C program files, like AutoCAD, I can't remember the folder name AutoCAD is. I'm going to allow that entire folder, and that will allow that app to run. Now, what does that mean if a user copies another file into there? It can run. Now, if they can't write to it, it reduces the risk. But if there's malware or vulnerabilities or anything like that, it's going to be able to put things into that folder and run it. So we don't typically like that. The best way, I'll say the best, I say the most secure way, and as a security nerd, most secure always seems to be best to me, is to permit by hash. Not always possible, by hash or by SHA of the file. So we say, I'm going to take a thumbprint of this file. If the file changes by 1 byte, it will not be able to run in my environment. And we can then go through other ways. So we can say, okay, I want to add a list of all the hashes of every single file into my allow list. And yes, I've done this manually before with 20,000 files on an endpoint. It's not pretty. We could then go, well, I'm going to allow these folders. And we could also do like certificates. So we could permit, and this is pretty common. Now, there are risks associated with certificates. Can you think of any risks with certificates, Rob?
Can I think of any risks about certificates? I can think about a particular piece of malware, 2021, that had a PB08 certificate, a fake trucking company in Canada that seemed to be allowed to run pretty much everywhere because some detection tools gave unnecessary credence to the fact that it was a signed file.
So in that case, that was a signed file, and the certificate. So a lot of AVs and EDRs will trust signed files more than unsigned files. And when you sign a file, you're essentially proving that the owner of this file, the creator of this file, the author, is who they say they are. So Microsoft would sign a file and say, this is Microsoft certificate. It's been validated as Microsoft. Now and again, it's very, very rare. Someone will compromise a certificate and they'll be able to sign software. Normally, if it's substantial, it gets revoked pretty quickly and it's no longer an issue. But someone will sign a certificate, a file with code signing cert as Microsoft. I think it's happened like once in history of Microsoft. But there is another problem with signing files, doing certificate only rules when you permit things on the allow list. And that is, if you said, I'm going to allow everything signed by Microsoft, Microsoft have a lot of tools that can be used in a really bad way. And I would say PowerShell as an example, but Microsoft actually didn't sign PowerShell, which leads me to the next point. Microsoft are really bad at not signing their software. So on one side, they sign a crap load of stuff that can be used and weaponized against you. And on the other side, they don't sign a lot of stuff they use. So
someone actually, I seem to remember somebody took great offense at one stage when you said Microsoft don't sign their things, Danny.
that I tend to offend a lot of people.
Well, this is true. But,
So,
a day of the week that ends in Y, generally.
So yes,
but yeah, they don't sign everything.
They do not sign everything. They don't even sign PowerShell, which in some respects is good because it means if you allowed PowerShell, it wouldn't be able to run if you allowed everything signed by Microsoft.
Sorry, yeah, we've got a bunch of things here. So Christopher Bacca said we block anything. Sorry, we block annoying browser extensions for Edge and Chrome. That's been answered. Nick has asked, does the Pineapple webinar involve a drone? Ha ha ha.
I've got something better than drone next year.
Oh God, I don't even want to know.
A helicopter. I want to get a helicopter.
Wesley, we still have several clients still stuck on terminal servers. It's painful. Wesley too showing his age, Danny, much like you. Christopher, we're rolling out ThreatLocker in an environment. We have already prevented users from doing stupid things. John Stewart has said use path, process, hash, and cert if possible.
Okay, so
let's some heavy lifting there.
Let's get on to this. So here's my preference. So when we add to an allowlist, and I'm not trying to think about ThreatLocker specifically, but I'm thinking about general allowlisting, and some programs will only allow you to do one. So we in ThreatLocker allow you to combine multiple together. So hash is best. Like hash is great because when you use hash, it means if the file changes, it cannot run, and it's much, much easier. The next way is you can use a path. You can use the certificate. The disadvantage of a path, if the file changes, someone puts something in that path, they change the file, they can run that bad file in that location. And the certificate, the disadvantage is you're allowing the entire company. There are places where certificate is valid. Now, when you build that list and you're creating that list, you have the ability to use, in some programs, in ThreatLocker, you can create a combination of multiple rules. So my preference is we always have multiple rules. So at least two. Now, hash, I'm not so worried about having two, but generally when you're talking about path, I would try and combine that. Hey, if it's in C program files Dropbox and it's digitally signed by Dropbox, then it can run. Or if it's in C program files AutoCAD, and I know someone's going to tell me that's not the path of it because I know it's so not then, and it's signed by, is it Autotask? I can never remember which one.
Autodesk.
Autodesk, that's the one, because it's Autotask is the data one. Autodesk, then it's allowed to run. So I would say if you're going to use a path, try and combine it with something like certificate. Now, sometimes you'll end up with a weird situation where the program that is running is opening a lot of DLLs, and those DLLs are changing their hash every time they're run, and they're not digitally signed. So this is where you need to try and find, if your allowlisting solution allows you to use multiple, you can do a combination of either created by process. So which program created this? Did an updater created it? Did an executable that's trusted create it? Or the process that calls it? So you could say these DLLs are allowed to run regardless of the hash if they're called by this process. So what that means is the user couldn't just copy a bad DLL into the folder and run it through run DLL. The original process would have to call it, making it not bulletproof, because nothing's bulletproof, but it's pretty damn close to it.
Just on that subject, Danny, I think you pretty much answered it, but just to confirm, we have a client that uses a specific software that updates constantly. How can we allow that software to update without ThreatLocker blocking the updates? Is it recommended to do this?
And I'd have to look at the software specifically, but generally, and what I'd recommend is ask the cyber heroes, because I would always say, step one, assuming it's not a built-in app, and we're going to get into built-in apps in a while. Step one, path and certificate is if the software is constantly changing. If you can use path and certificate, use path and certificate. If you can't use path and certificate, use the updated process that created the file, because that will basically says if this updated process created the file and it's called by this process and it's allowed to run. You can, if you look in the unified audit, you can see the process, the created by process, the path, whether it's signed, and then you can do that. Generally, we'll make a decent recommendation for you automatically based on what other customers have done and what our engineers say. But if we don't give you one, our engineers on the cyber hero can actually give you an answer. Now,
Hang tight for 1 second, Danny. I want to try and keep up with these. So Danny has asked, when you're adding a certificate and full path, if a malicious actor that can impersonate the parameters of the legit cert, they can run the process. We should have the ability to add the public key as part of the parameters on ThreatLocker. Would you agree? I suspect that's a loaded question.
no, so now there's another part of this. So you can't just now when you add the certificate, you have two options in ThreatLocker. You can add the subject of the certificate. So hey, it's signed by Microsoft, and when you add that, we highly recommend you include the entire address. Now, Microsoft's going to be really hard to replicate, but if you went and created a small company that no one's heard of, and then someone come and registered another company with a similar name in a different state, make sure, right, the city state is in the address. Now, when we check the certificate, we validate the certificate keychain. Now, I will say that validation is done in two areas. One is based on your computer's keychain. And if someone had admin access to the machine, they could potentially create a CA root chain that's spoofed. We're getting into extremism here. Like you got to be an admin, you got to do this. And we also validate it across our other customers. So we have a database of CertDB, which goes down. The other thing you can do, now that's the subject. So if someone else was to go and say, I'm going to self-sign this with my own code, the certificate's going to be different. It's going to be your name on it now. But let's just say you created your own keychain, you installed it on the machine. We're getting into extremism here. When you self-sign that, it's going to now say, on your machine, it's going to say it's trusted, but on anyone else's machine, it's not, because the root CA isn't in there. You can also add the SHA of the certificate. So we'll take a SHA of the key to say this exact certificate. Now, this is useful actually when there's no keychain, because quite often what people do is they'll self-sign their code, they'll send it to a user, and ThreatLocker will say, we're not accepting this cert because we can't validate the keychain. So when you use the SHA, you can still add it, and it will still accept it because it's saying, okay, we're taking this exact cert, we've got no validation, but we're doing it based on the actual SHA of the key. So that is where that's very, very useful. I want to answer the question on should users be included in the allow list. So when you're creating an allow list, should you be saying Bob is allowed to access this program only? And there isn't a right or wrong answer to this, but there are general tools that you want to avoid users accessing. And unfortunately, PowerShell is not one of them. We have another webinar on ring fencing, so we'll go into that. Too many applications call on PowerShell. If you hard block it, it gets very, very difficult on a user basis. It's nice, and it's not impossible. If your environment's nice and clean and very strict, it's okay. But where you have admin tools, that's where you should say this group of users only can open it. So it's not just allowed or denied. You should put the users in the policy if you can. If your starting point right now is I have no allow listing in place, what you need to do is figure out what you've got and put it in place, and then start pulling back from there, because there's no point in trying to get to the end without getting halfway down the street. These are the biggest problems. And this is one of the reasons that ThreatLocker exists. Updates to applications being blocked. I remember the first time I deployed allow listing properly, I was so smug with myself. Our environment was secure. No one could run crap. And then what happened was Patch Tuesday. And the whole world. Did you know Microsoft released about 110,000 unique files every Patch Tuesday, just in the various versions of Windows 10? It's infuriating, but that is one of the biggest challenges that we had. The other challenge, pitfalls that tend to come up quite a lot when you use allow listing, is users want to run a meeting app that hasn't been permitted in the organization. So they suddenly have a Zoom meeting, and of course, things like that are really, really time sensitive. So the user says, now. And the third one is developers. Now, allow listing isn't an all or nothing, and there are things in the middle you can do. And it depends on your appetite for security versus ease of use and your users being interrupted. Developers compile code probably 13, 14 times a day, so you can't permit every time they compile their application. And there are solutions which include, this is where allowing the source code folder, or maybe allowing it and ring fencing it, or maybe allowing the source code folder if it's created by the IDE, Visual Studio, whatever it may be. There's a whole bunch of options there, but these are the pitfalls that you want to think about when you're doing your allow listing solution.
The developer ones is actually quite interesting. I mean, I worked with a company some time ago, and they had a dev folder, so call it CDev for argument's sake, and they had their machines in learning mode for far longer than they should have. And by far longer, I mean a number of months. But by the end of that couple of months, the dev application definition with all those new files being created had grown to about 1 million items in it. Okay, huge application definition just purely from all the files that were created. Now, what we did was we started creating proper custom rules to allow the devs to do what they need to do with the software that we're using within that software. So as you mentioned, like, you know, if it's devems.exe and it's in cdev, or if it's, you know, Visual Studio, it's in that location. Again, custom rules with a couple of those parameters. I think we ended up with somewhere in the region of about 36 or 38 custom rules that effectively negated the need for that 1 million item application definition, allowed the devs to do what they needed to do, but not outside of that. And the other thing I would say about developers, and any developers that are listening are probably not going to like me from this, but one of the things that we see when we're working with development companies is people have their stuff all over the place. So user A has a folder called cdev, user B has a folder called crobdev, user C has a folder called devenv. And one of the things that you can do with this is you can actually force people to standardize. So you can say, okay, you're going to use your OneDrive dev folder, and that's where you're going to keep your stuff. And as long as you stay within that location, you're going to be able to do anything you need to do. But if you step outside of that and try and keep your stuff somewhere else, you're not going to be able to use it. So you can use it to keep devs structured as well.
Okay, so I'm going to oversimplify this, and then Rob's going to show you how we can help in these environments in the demo side. I hope, because I didn't get my demo environment set up, so Rob's on demo duty, and I can abuse him for the next 30 minutes.
Yay.
Let's simplify this. First step to make allowlisting solution effective: identify what's running in your environment. Whatever software you have in your environment, identify it. Like, if you don't know what you're running, you can't create an allow list. So step one. Step two is build a list of the files required to run that software. Now, that's the scariest part. And this is the part that I remember working on a project for allowlisting 6 months. It was a whole team of 6 months, 6 people, 2,000 endpoints, still not ready to go live. Build the list. And we're going to show you how that's not the case anymore, but build a list of what's needed in your environment, all the DLLs, all the scripts, all the executables, everything in your allow list. So build it. And then once you've done that, put it into enforcement mode. So that's 3 steps. Sounds easy because I put it in 3 steps. The next thing you need to worry about is, how do I maintain the update? So when new software has been updated, there's a new version of Chrome, new version of Windows, new version of Zoom, new version of Teams, maintain that list. And Rob's going to show you how we do this, because these are the biggest challenges. Step 2 and step 4 were the hardest things about allowlisting. And that's one of the reasons we created ThreatLocker. And then when somebody wants to add new software, making sure that software and that approval process is as easy as possible. So that's the steps to successfully deploy it. Now, how do we do it in ThreatLocker? And, you know, I want to point this out. We've got 45,000 companies that use ThreatLocker right now.
I think it's more, Danny, isn't it?
Well, that was 45,000 last time I counted, which is a long time ago in fairness, but probably 50-something thousand companies, but say 45,000. 99% of those companies had never considered using allowlisting before using ThreatLocker, and they are all using allowlisting now. And they're all able to effectively use allowlisting. Some of them are small businesses, dental offices, car dealerships, through MSPs, and some of them are parts of the US Navy, JetBlue, banks, sports teams, Orlando Magic, all these big companies that use it, and they'd never done that either before. And I've been able to deploy 10,000 endpoints in 5 hours of customer time, and then probably another 15 hours of training time for them to make sure they know how to use it. And that's an hour a week over 5 weeks. So this is not
a heavy lift.
It's not a heavy lift, and it's very, very effective. So I'm going to switch to you, Rob. So if you can share your screen, if I stop sharing.
I will. I just want to, so one good question that was, well, sorry, as I said, they're all good questions, Danny. One good question was, I'm curious what you think the best practice is with the initial learning mode and global policies. Will the system still learn and approve already created global type policies?
Okay, so, the word global means different things. So in ThreatLocker, we can create policies to allow software at 5 different levels. And I'll start at the bottom. We can create them at the computer level. We can create them at the group of the computers in, so workstation servers, terminal servers, whatever it may be. We can create at the organization. Now, you can now have sub-organizations as well. So if you've got child orgs, divisions, acquisitions, if you're an MSP and you've got children, you have sub-organizations. You can then create global what we'd call global group name policies, so global workstations, global servers, or you can create global policies, which will apply to all of your children. When ThreatLocker is learning, we learn what wouldn't have been allowed. So if you were to create a policy, say permit Zoom globally across all of your subdivisions, all sub-organizations, then Zoom would not have hit our deny policy at the time, therefore would not be learned below that. So, and generally speaking, and it's interesting people say the recommendation. So there's a balance here. If you're one IT guy and you're managing 1,000 people, the recommendation may be different to if you are a bank with a security team that is very, very strict. So if you want to say the most extreme recommendation is to permit software to only the devices that need it and the users that need it. And the most liberal, without starting to get into serious security implications, is permit things. Someone wants Grammarly, I'm going to allow Grammarly across the whole company. Somebody wants Office, I'm going to allow it across the whole company. So there is no one's on one end of that exactly. Some people will say, okay, and we're going to say these are the apps we use across the company. So we use Zoom in ThreatLocker, we use Office, we use Chrome. Or actually, we don't use Chrome across the company. So we'll go through and we'll say these are permitted for the organization. And then we've got groups of developers. Our developers group can use Visual Studio. And then we have individual exceptions, fringe exceptions, where somebody needs a certain app. Maybe you're a video editing guy in the marketing department. Nobody else needs this video editing app. So we've allowed that on that computer. If you've got low resources and you don't want to have to permit the same app twice, you can do it globally or at the entire organization level. If you have a lot of resources and you want to be absolutely as strict as possible, you should do it at the end user level.
John made a valid point, and just highlight, review your application policy or applications and policies after learning mode to look for any unwanted software that was on there before to remove access. So again, that's something that's really important. So even though we might see something, find something, allow it, you should definitely review your applications and policies. And if there's anything, I mean, the one thing I always say to people is, look, if you deploy this, even if it's in learning mode, you will find things on your machines that you had no idea were there. There will always be some surprises, and stopping those things from being able to run is as simple as flicking a switch. It just changes it from a permit to a deny. You can actually enforce individual policies, even if the machines aren't secured. So while they're in learning mode, do you want to block TeamViewer? You can create a block policy for TeamViewer. You can get it to kill running processes as well. So even if it's running on a machine, it will actually stop it running on the machine as well. And we did have quite a few customers who, when obviously wasn't, as it turns out, a massive breach with TeamViewer, but when that happened a couple of weeks ago, a lot of people just wanted to nuke TeamViewer from all their machines. So
okay,
yeah.
Do you want to share your screen? And there was another program this week that was killed running processes quite a lot too, but we won't talk about that.
Yeah. Don't mention the war, Danny. So I am sharing my screen, I believe.
Okay, so step one, identify the software we use. So how does this work? We deploy an agent, Rob. What do we see when we deploy the agent?
What we see, what we see is our computers installed, obviously. The computers will not be secured at that point. They won't be blocking anything. They won't be stopping anything. Fundamentally, at that stage, all they're going to be doing is logging data. So everything that runs, basically everything that's happening in the environment, now obviously in my particular environment, I do have a Mac here, which I know is setting Danny's OCD off significantly. But yeah, basically everything that runs in the machine is going to be logged and stored here within the in-flight audit. Now, what we do with that information, specifically during that initial period, is we will create a set of policies. We will basically create the allow list. Go on, Danny, you're...
Nope, we're going to create the allow list. So, and the idea of this is we're going to build an application set out of what's running in your environment. So we're going to we do two passes this. One is we say, let's find everything that ThreatLocker knows, and it's independently validated by going to the vendor directly and downloading the software and checked every hash against them. So we can call them built-in definitions. And let's find everything then we do let's find everything that ThreatLocker doesn't know. So if we find a file called custom app 123 in your program files folder, we've never seen it, we're going to allow that application. We're going to create a definition. We're going to say, we don't know what this is, but we created a policy for you anyway, and you can decide.
You can then review those policies, and as I said, decide if there's something that you don't like the look of, something you don't think should be running, you can just disable the policies. Just to mention as well, so obviously we've got a set of, I'd call it a one size fits most policies for example, workstations or servers. So these are a set of default policies. So things like Office, Chrome, Teams, etc. They're the default things that are effectively going to be allowed to run. Now, if you decide you don't want Chrome, you can literally just go in and stop or turn off the policy to allow Chrome to run. But we do have those default policies as well. That will basically mean most things within these parameters will be able to run in most environments. You will notice as well, the other purpose of these default policies, and it's not something we're going to go into today, is about ring fencing things. So even those things that are allowed to run, things like PowerShell, command prompt, reg serve, run DLL, all those kind of things, we want to restrict what they can do, but that's a subject for another day. So that's the other purpose of those default policies.
Okay, so we've done a week, we've deployed this, it's a week later, 2 weeks later, we go into the applications page. Can you jump back to the applications page? We can see a list of everything found. We can also see how many devices it was found on. We'll also show you other information, because knowledge is power. And we can do filters here. So we can, for example, filter for shopping tools. Have you got, if you go into filter shopping tool, category by shopping tools there? Category on the search bar on the left.
Right. What? Oh.
Do you have any shopping tools?
I hope not.
You should have. I always have Cooper on there. It makes a good.
I have zero shopping tools. I have
zero shopping tools. So if you had, for example, a shopping tool, a coupon clipper, a remote access tools, you can do these filters. You can also filter by country. So you can say, where was the software developed? Was it developed in Russia? Was it developed in China? By the way, you cannot block all Chinese software on your computer. Everyone asks me that question. It doesn't, well, you can, but most computers, your nice clean Hyper-V image doesn't have anything, but most computers have drivers and hardware, and the drivers and hardware are created in China. However, we can ring fence them, and that's an option later on. So you can see
it is also because I've got a Mac in here, Danny, which is obviously really well behaved and really clean.
Not made in China at all, is it?
Physically, yes, but it does. I'm pretty sure it's got a little logo on the bottom that says designed by Apple in California.
Okay, so
sure, they must build it there as well. I mean, they'd hardly design it there and build it somewhere else.
In big letters, designed by Apple in California, small letters, made in China. But you have the ability to see this. So step one, we've identified the software we use in your environment. My suggestion at this point is to get the machines locked down. The biggest thing that we run into with customers is they are trying to clean this list up before they lock down the machine, and it keeps growing. Lock down the machines and then go back and clean up, because we want to draw a line in the sand. We want to accept that we have bad stuff in our environment. And by the way, everybody has bad stuff in their environment they don't want. There's nobody we haven't seen with bad stuff in their environment. We even did an election board here in the United States recently, and they had lots of Russian software in their environment. So it doesn't mean they can get into their computers, but they were freaked out by it and they wanted to block it immediately. But step one, lock down the machine. So how do we do that? We go to secured mode.
Correct.
Okay, now one of the things we do, and we don't have time to go into too much detail, but before you do a lockdown, you can do a simulation. Biggest fear people have, what is going to break? So what we typically say is, hey, if you're a big company, let it learn for 4 weeks. We're going to go in and then we're going to do a 3-week simulation. And what that tells us, we can switch it to secure, but before we do that, we can go into the unified audit. And we can click on that drop down and we can click filter, simulate denies. And it will show us everything that would have been denied if we were locked down. And if you've got that DLL that's constantly changing, or that software that's updating, it's always payroll software, always payroll software, then we're going to deal with that. Now, one of the nice things about ThreatLocker is that we're going to track it. So we've built a list. We've blocked everything that's not on the list. The next challenge is, how do we maintain updates? We've got about, so there's 2 things we do in ThreatLocker. One is we have what's called built-in apps. We've got about 3,500 apps that we have relationships with the vendors where we get their software either the moment it's released or before it's released, and we update our definition. So if you're using Zoom update is not going to be blocked if you've got a built-in policy for Zoom, because we will add those hashes into the definition before. And this is your custom version of Zoom, I'm guessing. So yeah, so this is the custom zoom, but if you go to the built-ins, you can't see the files in there because they're covered by the built-ins. But we have the built-in things, and we will update those for you. We have about 3,500 apps. Patch Tuesday, every Patch Tuesday, this place is like a beehive. There's so many people, so many procedures, so many steps, testing, removing, adding into those definitions for Windows to make sure that those Windows updates are not blocked when they get released. So that's the, we've blocked everything that's not on the list, maintaining the list. The other thing we do is we have really built-in intelligence. So we talked about creating rules. How do we create those rules? So I can't even think of software that isn't built in, but let's just pretend AutoCAD wasn't built in for the moment. So you've gone into AutoCAD and you want to permit that software to run. So ThreatLocker learns it. Now, AutoCAD suddenly updates and ThreatLocker blocks it. Pretend it is built in, so it wouldn't happen. And then what happens is the user gets a pop-up saying, hey, something's been blocked. They request it, and you approve that software. Now, when you approve that software, we're smart enough to cross-reference the data with all other calls. So every time our engineers help a customer, that data goes into a big database. And we say, oh, we recommended that AutoCAD updates and changes regularly. So we're going to automatically create a rule that says, if it's AutoCAD and it's signed by Autodesk and it's in this folder, then allow it to run. So you don't have to create those rules over and over. Thomson Reuters is another example. The first customer we see with Thomson Reuters, it gets blocked. Second, third, fourth. We then learn. So not only do you could go off and create your own custom rules, but you could also, ThreatLocker will suggest them based on all of the data we've got from all of our clients. So that we've seen this file changes before. This is how we recommend you permit it for the custom rules. And that really reduces your impact of updates. During the first few months, you might have a few weird apps. Once you create those custom rules, those updates are going to go. And I know we're really, really close on time. So I want to finalize on how do we add new software into the environment? What do we have to block, Rob? So you're locked down. What can we show?
So we want to see stuff not able to run.
Yeah, let's run something blocked.
Take your pick. Steam.
Okay, so this is what the user sees, can see, and everything is customizable. And they get a pop-up saying ThreatLocker has been blocked. If you're using ServiceNow or you're using some kind of a software, you can integrate this with the ticketing system. Now, recently we added extra information for the user. So we'll actually tell a user where the information was made, what the program is, and what it will have access to if it's permitted. And this is really, really important because what we've seen is things like, hey, someone's requesting Cooper. Do you want to request access to Cooper, a coupon clipper that was made in China and will be able to see your passwords? Not saying they're stealing your passwords. It allows the user to self-police. So in this case, the user is going to request access to Steam. So if you go request there.
Just one very quick question. So somebody asked, at what level in ThreatLocker policy hierarchy do you recommend configuring a default deny policy? At the very bottom is the answer to that question. So the bottom of the groups is where that lives. Sorry, I just didn't want somebody to do something that might break stuff.
Generally, the group policies currently run last in ThreatLocker. There is a change, so you can actually change the order of them coming. But right now, the policy order runs global group name, organization, computer, and then group. And the default deny, it's there in the group policy. And it's set up automatically.
You've also just answered anonymous attendee's question, which is about the policy hierarchy. So he wants to have something permitted on one machine, but denied at the entire org level. Not possible now, but coming.
So you've got Steam there. So how do you permit Steam if you want to permit Steam?
So again, Steam is a known application. So Steam is something that matches our built-ins. If it matches our built-ins, you can have a degree of confidence. Well, you know it is what it's supposed to be, first of all, but you can also have a degree of confidence that there's nothing malicious there because our
I don't know if that's true, because I mean, we have.
I was going to say the app team used the testing environment to run everything.
No, but it's not malicious in malware. But if it was TeamViewer, that would match a built-in. So but you can. We've tested the software and we know that it is what it says it is.
Correct. You can also obviously check VirusTotal for things. Are we going to run the testing environment just for?
Well, I was going to ask you to run the business app in the testing environment because that's an interesting.
So we'll just permit Steam. Yeah.
And yeah, we're going to go into ring fencing in another webinar and elevation in another webinar. They're really cool features where you can limit what the application can do. You can allow it to run as an admin, but there's another webinar on that. So I'll let you just let that run.
Okay, so just approve it for a computer.
And what happens is, how long does it take?
Not long, usually. let me see, application control. Will we show the policy that's been created?
Yeah. So
As I move my, okay, so we've just created a policy to allow Steam to run. And within a short period of time, we get the notification to say your application's been approved. You can now run this application. Click on run now. And of course, because we didn't use elevation, I'm going to get my UAC prompt. But basically, the thing was allowed to run.
Okay, let's try and run your business app there, because I want to show an example of something that's, look, you should always use a testing environment if ThreatLocker doesn't know what it is, and this is a good reason why. So somebody tries to request a business app here. ThreatLocker has no extra data on it.
This is what I want to run it anyways. Okay. So once again, the request comes through to the response center. Okay, now unknown application. So this is not something that matches one of our built-ins. So we recommend that you should run it in the testing environment before approving. So I'm going to open our testing environment. Do you want to explain what that is, Danny, just while this is loading?
Yeah, so essentially the testing environment is an isolated sandbox running Windows that will allow you to run anything in it and test what it does before it runs. So if this was a real business app, when we expect it to run, would see it offer payroll, whatever, something else. Now, when we run it in the testing environment, the first thing it does is test the file itself against VirusTotal. So if you clicked on the VirusTotal on the file itself, it actually says it's good. It says there's two AVs which say everything's bad, say it's a false positive. But then once it starts running, it starts to actually install more malware. So you see the business app itself only hit 2 pieces of malware, which is Apex and Mass Secure. They say everything's malware, so I'm not overly concerned about it. Everything else said it was good, by the way.
If you say everything is malware, you're never wrong about when something is malware.
That's true.
Okay.
So we call it allowlisting. So once it ran, it actually created a test virus, which is just EIKI, but it actually did some other nefarious stuff. If you click on the canary, we have bait files on this machine. So we have credit card numbers, other information. It changed and accessed that data. So we want to know, well, why would this business app access the data? We can also see that it made changes to the system. So it put something in a startup folder to create a foothold. So if you click on the system tab there up, and you can see that it added our test virus into the startup. Now, if this was good, we could end and capture it. Now, what's cool about this is, let's say this was a random app that had 200 files. It would capture all of the dependencies for it, but because it's bad, we can just discard it. Now, a couple of other things I want to finish with, because we are running out of time. And Rob, the first one is, there's a lot of power to this. We can configure this, different levels, into Active Directory integration, ServiceNow integration. We can do all things like that, help this integrations with various RMMs and PSAs. It's very, very seamless and very, very easy. What we've done is identify the software we used, built a list, turn it into block mode to block anything not on the list. We've maintained updates, and then we've added required software to the list. If you have a deployment of allowlisting, this is the easiest way you can do it, and allowlisting is going to give you the most benefit. We also have a phone app, so everything can be done from the phone app. We have maintenance modes, learning modes, and everything else you could expect. And if you want to find out more, please, go. I think Spencer's going to post a demo link. Are you in the chat, Spencer? Hopefully in the next few minutes, we'll see a demo link in the chat, but please book a demo with ThreatLocker. And if we didn't answer your question, we apologize for that. There's also other features like ring fencing elevation that make this really, really powerful.
Just sorry, really quick one. There is a good question here from Kevin. Is there a way to determine the last time an application control policy triggered? It would make cleaning out old policies much easier. Short answer to that is yes, Kevin. If you just go into your policies list, it will show you the last match date. So you can see here, last match for this, last match for this, and you can do that basically at every level.
And there's a cool button as well. If you click on that drop down list, the 3 dots, there's a remove unused policies.
Yeah, so it's a 1-button cleanup. We do with customers all the time. I had somebody yesterday, 600 policies went down to 170 from using that remove unused. And it's good practice. I mean, if stuff isn't matching, if it's not getting hit, there's no point in allowing it.
We do have a coupon code going in the chat as well, 40 Trust World. And did we get that demo link posted in the chat? Yeah, so we booked a demo link. If you want to find out more how ThreatLocker Allowlisting can help, just schedule a demo. We'll do a free walkthrough. We can do a free trial. One of the nice things about our Allowlisting is people are always nervous. You could deploy it. You could do simulations for 4 weeks and you haven't even paid a penny to ThreatLocker. So it's not like you have to go and buy something hoping it'll work. We go through the whole trial free of charge. You can deploy it. I've had people deploy. I've actually got someone with 10,000 plus seats right now deployed, and they haven't even signed up yet. Their trial's going on quite a little longer than it should have done probably, and they want to be 100% comfortable that this isn't going to blow up their systems, and they got to that point just by doing it on a trial. So, if you need to deploy a large number of seats, we can test, we can simulate, and then we can lock down those seats during the trial period as well to show you how easy this process is. I think we are well out of time, Rob, but thank you, Rob. And
time flies when you're having fun, Danny.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. If we didn't answer your questions, we apologize. I think we have another webinar in 2 weeks. Spencer, let me see if I can find that there. It's on this. Nope.
I was going to say, I might actually hang around for a few minutes afterwards and try and answer any questions that were asked that we didn't get to.
Okay, well, I'll let you do that, and I'm going to get to my next meeting. But thank you, guys, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.